Hey there, baseball fans. Nathan Rohde, Shooter Hunt, and Brandon Hall here for another Coffee and Curveballs episode. Today we're talking about recruiting. This is a big topic with young athletes, trying to go through the process as easily as possible as they're looked at by colleges from all levels. We have something on the website called Recruiting Essentials. If you go to our homepage, click the More tab on the right-hand side and scroll down, you can find it. It's an unbelievable tool for young athletes to be using.
It really is, Rody. I mean, probably the most informational piece that we have on the site comes from Recruiting Essentials. It's something that I still go to all the time. Every time Brandon puts out an article, I send him a text like, this is the best thing we have. Because for parents who are coming to the site, it really gives you good insight into the recruiting process. Prospects, hey, I'm going on visits, I'm emailing. There's all sorts of information that Brandon's constantly giving, and with his knowledge, it's the best you're going to find.
Mm-hmm. And that's the reason we have Brandon on with us today. He is the man behind Recruiting Essentials. He's putting out that information, he's answering questions, he's going through everything that you should be asking. And the reason that you need to be listening to him is Brandon was a coach at the college level for, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, 16 years. You worked your way up. Right, yeah. You went through it as a player. You went through it as a coach. He ended up as the associate head coach at Charlotte before he came over to PBR. Brandon, thanks a lot for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. I just hope with the fame and fortune you guys have hit off Coffee and Curveballs, I can go to dinner in peace here after this airs.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll try to keep that going for you. But Shooter obviously is going to chime in as well. Went through this process as a player himself. Spent a couple of years as a coach and recruiter at Tulane. So tons of information by these guys today. I'm just going to be the moderator because I didn't really go through this process, as a player. But Brandon, to start us off, just give us a little taste because, as we said, we can go on for hours about this, but give us a little taste as to how the process has changed in the time that you've been involved, as a player, as a coach, and now with PBR.
Yeah, the biggest things, the NCAA rules are constantly changing, and there's more changes coming. I know our partners at D1 Baseball covered the coaches convention and did a really good job with some of the meetings that came out of there, but the recruiting rules are changing. The grade requirements from the NCAA are changing. Then the other parts happen as TV's become a big deal, money's gotten involved, and coaches are getting fired very quickly. And so ability matters. The ability to make sure you're putting yourselves in winning situations matters a lot. You've got a lot of administrators who grew up playing Madden football and building their teams, and now they've got their own, and they're doing similar type things, and it's quick triggers. So the ability to produce on the field, graduate your players, keep your players out of trouble, all that stuff matters, and you see things happening across the country on a daily basis with coaches, and that filters into the recruiting process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Certainly. So with Recruiting Essentials, the goal is to provide this information to the young athletes to kind of help them along in the process. We're going to touch on a few of the topics today, but to start off, what are the basic keys to a successful recruitment process for a player?
The biggest thing is finding a match. It's the ability to find a school that fits what you want to do athletically, fits what you want to do academically, and then also personally. There are players, and one of my visits that I took when I was going through, and I was, a very fringy D1 player, but had the chance to visit a bigger school, and it was overwhelming for me, and it just wasn't a fit. And luckily, I went on that visit and figured it out. But that's the biggest part, is finding those pieces that line up, because the ability to maximize yourself in the classroom will affect your ability on the field. The ability to maximize yourself on the field will affect you in the classroom, especially for 18 to 22-year-olds who are still growing, still maturing, and really stepping away from mom and dad for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brandon, you're right with that. And just cutting in for a second here, Rody, with that, find that right fit. It's tough for, 15, 16-year-old to decide, like, hey, this is where I want to go to college and make my – you're setting up 40 years in the future based on where you're going to college and school there and the experience that you have. But you're right there. Just feeling comfortable in the situation you're at and going to multiple places and checking off boxes and making a good, educated decision, very key in the recruiting process.
Mm-hmm. I think the starting point, I would think for players is just the idea of, I love baseball, I want to keep playing this. But really, it's kind of that initiating the contact. So should players be contacting coaches? When should they be doing it? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so and it's a big deal for coaches as well. I mean, we got bombarded on a daily basis. There would be periods of the year where it wasn't uncommon to receive 100 emails a day from prospects, and so trying to filter through that. We tell guys the earlier you start the process, the quicker you get in the database. And that's what all schools are doing. They're building a database. Now the database is going to be used for camps. The database is going to be used for showcases. That's going to be used to follow. And they're gaining other information out of those databases too. Who's your high school coach? What's his number? So they're able to open up and correct other databases that they have off of all this interest and all these emails and contacts they're getting from players. Where it becomes real is when the school starts reaching out personally. Mm-hmm. It's not a form letter, and that's when the process really kind of kicks off. But high school players need to be taking initiative and need to be able to reach out to players. And there's a right way to do that. There's a right way to send a text. There's a right way to send an email so that it does get noticed. It's very similar to what your mom and dad may be going through trying to find a job with their resume. If the resume is the same as 99 out of 100, it gets put in the pile of 99. Mm-hmm. So how do you make yourself stand out a little bit and still highlight what you do well?
And all of this is in the recruiting essentials. Brandon does a great job on there, but texting and emails, all that sorts of stuff, Brandon he does give you advice on how you should go about it. There's a way to do and not to do. But again, like Brandon was saying, be proactive in the recruiting process. You want to start earlier on. You want to immediately have your schedule ready for coaches because they're going to want to come see you. And if you're sending them one schedule, you're not playing on that day, they're not going to be happy wasting their time. So make sure you know your schedule. And the other thing that's great about us at the Prep Baseball Report, to give us a plug here, is that you do have your profile. You have video, scouting report, and each state's scouting director is really entrenched in their state's process. I talk to all our guys, and it's one of those things where they love talking about the players in their state and really pumping them up. So having that person to lean on, talking to coaches and going between, but also pumping up with the profile makes it easy for the college coaches to get to. This really helps the recruiting process. Mm-hmm.
I think you both make great points there, and in the advice that you give with making contact with coaches, but also coaches like high school coaches, travel coaches, can be middlemen. The college coach contacts them, tells you as a player to contact the college coach. And then, so remember that, PBR can also do that as well. And also with Brandon, your state director, and the information that's on our site, there's a lot of information there for you to use as a part of this process that should be helpful. So it's certainly something to take advantage of. And then another point Shooter makes for me, in listening in is, this is a point you can make in with anything in life, but it's about being organized, making sure that you have the right schedule. But then it also goes into like having your transcripts ready to send to the school when they ask for that, and staying on top of your schoolwork because of GPA qualifications, not just with the NCAA clearinghouse, but with certain schools, depending on which one that you're looking at.
And Rody, to come in real quick, and Brandon, I'm sure you can attest to this. The first question I feel like every recruiter I talk to when I say, hey, I got a kid who's pretty good, what are his grades? It's almost immediately every time, what are his grades, what are his test scores? It's the first question they ask.
There's two parts to it. One, it's admissions and being able to get players in, because baseball's not basketball, it's not football. If you're academically eligible, it doesn't mean you're getting in. You've got to be able to get into the school, one. The second part is it's a partial scholarship sport. And so the ability to stack academic money, help your family out, especially when you're looking at some of the private schools or state schools that may have lottery systems, the ability to add on to baseball money means you have to hit certain minimum requirements with the NCAA.
Mm-hmm. The next point that we want to make here, I feel like I get this email, somewhat often, probably a lot less often than Brandon, you do, or, others that are a little bit more entrenched with the recruiting world with the younger guys. But I always get the question of, how do I get noticed? What can I do to make sure that I'm seen by scouts, whether it's for the draft or, for recruiters if, you're looking to go to college. So it's a pretty loaded and ambiguous question and hard to answer. But what are some of those key things that coaches are looking for when they go out and they're looking for their next recruit?
So when coaches are starting to build their process for the summer, they're going to start online. They're going to start with friends of the program. They're going to start with good programs. They're going to start with good teams, whether it's high school or travel or Legion, it doesn't matter. And so for the players, it's not just how do we become seen and how we get to that process of being seen. It's the ability to be ready to be seen. And so do I have video available? Because if you reach out to a school, 95% of them are the very first thing they're going to turn back around and says, thank you for your interest, send us video. Mm-hmm. Do you have a place where you can send a minute to minute and a half video to these programs that are trying to see you? In terms of showcasing and being and playing, and have your schedules ready, have them sent to the college coaches, and then find out where those college coaches go. There are certain events every year that every school will attend. Our future games in Indianapolis, there's close to 300 Division I coaches there. I think I saw almost 2 schools from every Pac-12 conference, which was different for me being on the East Coast. It was just unreal. So how do you put yourselves in those positions to be in the right position to be seen by schools you want to be seen by? Then the final part is be realistic with your expectations too. If you're running an 860 and your infield velocity is below 70, you're probably not going to Oregon State. It just is. So talk to your high school coach, talk to your summer team coaches, find a realistic outlook on how you're being evaluated. Now, having said that, I was pegged as a Division II player, and luckily I was left-handed, and I peaked up a little bit, and I developed late. I had a decent little college career, but listen to what people are saying, but still strive to get to where your goal is.
Mm-hmm. You say decent little college year. You were the body double for Freddie Prinze Jr. in Summer Catch, so pretty good career, I would say. But Shooter, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, Brandon, going along with that, you just touched on a little bit, being told as a Division II player versus Division I. These are all things that the coaches are out there constantly evaluating. And there are certain things that go into, especially with the earlier and earlier recruiting process, just the athleticism of a player. It's usually what stands out the most. When I go to a game, and mostly when I was coaching, you're immediately looking at the shortstop, right, center fielder, the catcher, the pitcher, and then kind of branching off, okay, this kid's a good size, this kid's a good runner. You just kind of find the good athletes, especially at a younger age. So that's one thing that gets looked for, is that athleticism immediately. But then even going into more of the hitability and just the fielding, there's just natural actions on the field. And Brandon, I'm sure you have some things that you look for immediately on the field, but those natural baseball actions are things that I look for immediately.
Yeah, and every school is going to be different. That there were people we would recruit, the 2 schools I coached at, that turned out to be very good players that other schools weren't recruiting. Then there were players that we just NP, they're not a player for us, and they go on to have really good careers somewhere else. So, and again, it gets back to finding that match and getting to know the school and how do they play and how do you fit in. Just because you can't run doesn't mean you can't play Division I baseball. It probably means that the school I was working at probably is not going to spend a whole lot of time recruiting you because of the style of play. Same thing from pitchers. Everybody's really hung up on velocity, and velocity allows for a lot of mistakes to occur and still get away with them. But there are programs that will take underdeveloped bodies and put them in their strength system, and all of a sudden the velocity comes later. So again, it's doing your homework and reaching out to schools and studying schools, and there's a lot of information out there for parents and families and players.
And there are many coaches who you just talked about, and we're a Spin Wins podcast or show here. So those guys can really spin it, even without the velocity. Coaches, there's a lot of projection going on. If you're having 8th and 9th graders committing, there's a lot of projection going into what they're going to become. That 80, 81, they're hoping for 94, 95 later on. But the projection is key right now for this recruiting process.
And it's difficult, and I don't think parents and players always understand how difficult it can be. One of the things we talk about, when I'm doing recruiting seminars, is in our ranking system. In our 2017 rankings in North Carolina, Mackenzie Gore was number 1. Austin Beck was number 2. They both went in the first round. Those were easy. The player grades we put on them, those were fairly easy player grades. 3 through 10 had the same player grade. 22 through 61 had the same player grade. There's a difference between being number 22 in the state and number 61 in the state. But it depends on who's doing the evaluation of how do we want to select those slots for those guys, because they had the same player grade. And so the same thing's happening in college campuses, the same thing's happening in draft rooms, where the player grades are similar, and now we're watching video, we're splitting hairs, who's going to go ahead of who. And it's a difficult process. For parents and players, again, the more times you can be evaluated, the more confidence comes with the player grade. So I'm not going to have a ton of confidence in a player grade in an 8th grader, but I may see enough where there are schools, hey, we'll go ahead and take a shot. But if I've seen him 14, 15 times over 3 years, I got a pretty good feel for what he has a chance to be. And so my offer, my talk with the family, where he may end up in our program, is a lot more specific than you're going to come in, you're going to do great things, and we're going to give you a chance. It can get more specific as we see the player more. So even in this process, I know schools are wanting to work quick, but the players have to understand when they're working quick, that confidence level in the grading system, or however they're evaluating the player, isn't going to be as high as if it is a player they've seen 12, 13, 15 times.
Mm-hmm. And one point that I want to make, we're going to go into a lot more detail about the recruiting process on a podcast. It gives us a little bit more time, and also we'll get into a little more opinion-based about how quickly it's sped up and rule changes and things of that nature. But one point that I think is definitely important that we'll reiterate on the podcast is social media for the teenagers. How important is it for them to be mindful of what they're doing on social media? Because in this day and age, I know it's a lot different than when I was in high school. Shooter, I'm sure it's the same for you. Brandon, it's way different from the time that you started coaching. This social media age, digital age with technology, just how much is out there, and the coaches see it. They're not ignoring it.
So the world of 140 characters is dangerous. It just, there's a lot of hitting Twitter, pitching Twitter. There's a lot of gurus that can type in 140 characters. The next question is what happens with the next 140 and the next 140 when you're looking at some of this stuff. And even with players, you're making an impression. What you do with that 140 characters makes an impression on people that are making their livelihood on your performance on the field and off. And again, if I have 30 players with the same player grade, I'm working to find ways to try to who's going to be number 1 out of that list and who's going to be number 30. Where are they going to dissect themselves? Social media plays into it because I am going to take a more mature person. The social media accounts for players, and they need to understand this, is a resume. Mm-hmm. You are not normal students. You're not going to be normal students. It's your resume. It's how you're perceived. And that's how people are going to do business with you. Mm-hmm.
And coaches are monitoring. It's there. They're following you. They're already trying to get in touch with you. So they're seeing this nonstop and trying to gather as much information as they can.
And I would tell you this, even when you get onto the college campus and you're a student, you're going to have people that you allow to follow you that you don't realize are within the athletic departments or the coaching staffs, because there is a monitoring system that has to happen, because what you do reflects on that program. You can block your site, you can lock your site, you can private your site. They have it. Mm-hmm. I did it for 15 years. We had experts come in and talk to our guys. We had it. And we had one expert come in and talk to our team, and he asked, he says, anybody got their account private? And said, okay, what's your account name? Boom, he popped it up on the screen, it was private. And he kept playing on his phone, and he kept talking to the guys. 5 minutes later, he had 30 tweets from the guy. Friend of a friend of a friend.
Yep.
All I got to do is be a friend of a friend of a friend, and I got to retweet, and boom, I've unlocked the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So be very mindful. Everything you put out, regardless of who you intend it to be seen by, is going to be seen by the people that are evaluating you.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to frighten kids, because I've been around a lot of coaches who, hey, we'd like to get to know the player too through this social media. Like, hey, this kid's got some, that moxie and swagger to him. Mm-hmm. He's not a jerk, but like, hey, this kid's confident in himself, and this is the type of player I want going out on Friday night to throw for me, or hitting in a 3-hole with 2 outs and 2 guys on. He's going to be, confident in his skills.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
Yeah, I think the point that I always make to kids is the same point I made to my sister when Facebook started becoming, a big thing is if you don't want mom to see it, don't post it. So just another thing to be mindful of. And Brandon, you made a great point that it still blows my mind that, kids say, well, but my account was private. It doesn't matter. You put it on the internet, it exists everywhere. So, but Shooter, was there anything else, with recruiting that you wanted to bring up?
Well, and this is all, again, on the recruiting essentials. I every time tweet about it. When the new article comes out, Brandon's probably sick of me sending them like, hey, this one was even better than the last one. It just continuously gets better. But it's a great resource. But there's so many things that go into baseball recruiting. And Brandon touched on it. It's not a numbers count sport. Like, it's partial scholarships getting pushed out there. So academics goes into it. Mom and dad go into it. How you are as a player obviously goes into it. The fit goes into it. Are you in state? There's so much other stuff that goes into the recruiting process that Brandon talks about, and this would take days for us to go through. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that goes into, hey, this is our player. Hey, positional needs. A lot goes into it.
Mm-hmm. And one of the articles I'm most proud of and kind of kicked it off was I think it was the first full article I wrote, and was process of managing scholarships. And we run through some of those scenarios. And one of the things we had all of our assistants do my last 10 years or so, anytime we brought a volunteer in or even a manager in, we gave them a sheet of paper and said, okay, you get 35 guys on your roster, you get 27 guys on scholarship, you got 11.7, you can only offer, the minimum you can offer is 25%, build a team. And then they would come back in with their piece of paper, and we would tear them to shreds for 30 minutes and laugh and have a great time as a coaching staff, because there's no right answer. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to win. You're not going to win a regional with a shortstop as a walk-on. Your closer's not going to be on 40%. Your Friday night guy ain't coming to school for 45%. It's not happening. So you've got to have money really in two catchers. 10 to 12 arms. Probably 3 middle infielders, 2 center field type guys. Now, okay, well, I want a power bat in the corner outfield. All right, go get him, big guy. You got 25%. Find a power bat for 25%. Where are you going to get him from? You're not going junior college. Those guys aren't coming for 25%. And so you start really trying to have to figure out and navigate this process. And as a family, it gives you a better idea when you sit down with the coaching staff and they say, hey, we feel we're making a great offer. It's at 45%. And we've had families be offended, and that's an above average offer when you actually break the numbers down. 11.7 divided by 27%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It certainly is. So, Brandon, it's a wealth of information. Shooter as well. Really appreciate you guys coming on and talking a little bit about the recruiting process today. To our viewers, if you take one thing from today, just know that it's the information that you need and that you want and is useful to you. It's out there. It's on you to gather that information and disseminate it and make it useful to yourself. Just know that Prep Baseball Report, and there's a lot of other people out there too, there are coaches that you can lean on. Don't be afraid to do it, because in the end, you're making a big decision and it shouldn't be taken lightly. So take all the information that you can get. We've got tons of it for you at prepbaseballreport.com. Like I said, we'll get on a podcast, dive into a little bit more detail. We'll certainly get into some opinion about the recruiting process. So Thanks again for joining us today on Coffee and Curveballs. We'll have plenty of opinions. I know we will, because it's getting pretty crazy out there. But until next time, I'm Nathan Rohde, Shooter Hunt, Brandon Hall. This is Coffee and Curveballs. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you guys at the ballpark.